The rope was already around the boy's neck. 12 men stood in a half-circle outside the Silver Creek General Store, their faces carved from stone and shadow. The boy, no more than 14, soaked to the bone, shivering in clothes that clung to his thin frame, stood on a wooden crate with his hands bound behind him. His dark eyes darted from face to face, searching for mercy in a crowd that had none to give. Jacob Mercer stood between the boy and the mob, one hand raised, the other resting on the grip of his revolver. The dust hadn't yet settled from where he'd ridden in hard, his horse still heaving at the hitching post. Water dripped from his sleeves, river water, cold as winter's first breath. "You pulled that rope," Jacob said, his voice low and steady, "and you'll have to go through me first." Sheriff Dalton stepped forward, his badge catching the late afternoon sun. "Step aside, Mercer. This ain't your business. I pulled him out of that river not an hour ago. That makes it my business." The crowd shifted. Murmurs rippled through 'em like wind through dry grass. Someone spat into the dirt. "That boy's a killer," a woman's voice called out. "My husband's blood is on his hands." The rope creaked as someone tested its weight against the beam above. Jacob's jaw tightened. The moment hung suspended, teetering on the edge of violence, ready to shatter everything. But before this moment shattered their world, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 days earlier, Jacob Mercer had been living the quietest life a man could want. His cabin sat on the bend of the Clearwater River, a half-day's ride from Silver Creek. Every morning started the same. Black coffee boiled over an open fire, the smell of pine heavy in the air, and the sound of water moving over stones. He'd check his trap lines, mend his fences, chop wood until his shoulders ached in that good, honest way. Jacob had come west to forget, to leave behind the war, the uniform, the things he'd done under orders he could never take back. Out here, a man could disappear into the work of surviving. No questions, no past. That morning, he'd been checking his nets downriver when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A cry, faint and desperate, carried on the current. He dropped his catch and ran upstream, boots pounding the rocky shore. The boy was in the middle of the river, thrashing, going under. The current had him, pulling him toward the rapids where the water turned white and mean. Jacob didn't think. He dove in, felt the cold punch the air from his lungs, and swam hard against the flow. He caught the boy by the collar just as he went under again, dragged him to the shallows, pulled him onto the bank where the kid coughed up river water and gasped like a landed fish. "You all right, son?" The boy nodded, shaken, unable to speak. That's when Jacob noticed the bruises on his kid's face, the split lip, and the fear in his eyes that had nothing to do with drowning. "What's your name?" "Daniel," the boy whispered. "Daniel Crow." And just like that, Jacob Mercer's quiet life ended. Jacob brought Daniel back to his cabin, gave him dry clothes and hot soup. The boy ate like he hadn't seen food in days, but he wouldn't meet Jacob's eyes. "Where are you from, Daniel?" "Nowhere." "You got family?" A shake of the head. "How'd you end up in that river?" Silence. Jacob didn't push. He'd been a boy once who didn't want to answer questions either. But something about Daniel Crow felt wrong. Not the boy himself, but the fear wrapped around him like a second skin. That night, Jacob rode into Silver Creek to restock supplies. The town felt different, tense.
People spoke in hushed clusters, then fell silent when he passed. At the general store, Mrs. Garrett barely looked at him. "You hear about John Garrett?" she asked, wrapping his flour and coffee in brown paper. "No, ma'am. Dead. Killed 2 nights ago. Shot in his own home." Her voice cracked. "They say it was a boy that done it. A half-breed boy with dark hair." Jacob's stomach dropped. "They got a description?" "About 14, thin, looks like he's got Indian blood." Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Sheriff's looking for him. Says when they find him, there won't be a trial. John was a good man." Jacob paid and left quickly, his mind racing. Back at the cabin, Daniel was gone. Just the borrowed clothes folded neatly on the chair, and a single word scratched in the dust on the table. "Sorry." Jacob grabbed his rifle and headed for the door. Then saw the boy standing at the edge of the clearing, silhouetted against the twilight. "You saved my life," Daniel said quietly. "I couldn't let you get mixed up in this." "Get mixed up in what?" "What they're saying I did." Jacob stepped closer. "Did you kill John Garrett?" The boy's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes."
The word hung in the air like gun smoke. Jacob's first instinct was to reach for his gun. His second was to listen. Something in the boy's voice, not defiance, not pride, but something broken. "Why?" Daniel's shoulders shook. "Because he killed my mother." The story came out in pieces, jagged and raw. Daniel's mother had been Crow Nation, her father a white trapper who died years back. She'd worked for the Garretts, cleaning, cooking. John Garrett had taken liberties. When she refused him, he'd beaten her. When she threatened to tell his wife, he put a bullet in her and buried her behind the barn. "Nobody believed me," Daniel said. "I tried to tell the sheriff." He laughed, said a half-breed's word meant nothing against a white man's reputation. "So you killed him?" "I went to his house to make him confess, to make him tell the truth." Daniel's voice cracked. "He pulled a gun. I didn't mean to. But when it was over, I knew no one would believe that either. So I ran." In the distance, Jacob heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders moving fast through the timber. "They're coming," Daniel whispered. Jacob made a choice in that heartbeat, the kind of choice that changes a man's course forever. "Get in the root cellar. Don't make a sound." 5 minutes later, Sheriff Dalton and a dozen men surrounded the cabin. Torches lit the darkness. Jacob stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "We're looking for the Crow boy," Dalton said. "Heard you pulled someone from the river today." "Pulled out a mule deer. Got tangled in a fallen tree. You boys want to search my place, you're welcome to try." The standoff lasted 30 seconds. Then Dalton spat. "If we find out you're hiding him, Mercer, you'll hang beside him." They rode off, but Jacob knew they'd be back, and next time they wouldn't ask. Jacob and Daniel rode through the night, heading for the territorial marshal 2 towns over. It was their only chance. Get to someone with authority beyond Silver Creek, someone who might actually investigate. They didn't make it. The ambush came at dawn in the narrow canyon pass. 8 riders, led by Tom Garrett, Tom's brother, blocked the trail ahead. Another 4 came up from behind. "Into the line," Tom called out. His face was twisted with grief and rage. "Hand over the boy." Jacob's hand moved to his revolver. "Can't do that." Then you'll die with him." The first shot split the morning air. Jacob dove from his horse, dragging Daniel with him behind a cluster of boulders. Bullets sparked off stone. He returned fire, aiming high, trying to scatter them, not kill them. These were townsfolk, angry, grieving, but not evil. "Daniel, when I say run, you run for that ravine. Don't stop. I'm not leaving you. Run!" Jacob stood and fired 3 shots in rapid succession, forcing the riders to take cover. Daniel bolted, made it 10 yards before a rope caught him around the chest. One of the men had circled around on foot. The boy went down hard. Tom Garrett was on him in seconds, gun pressed to his head. "Drop it, Mercer, or I paint the rocks with his brains." Jacob lowered his rifle, raised his hands. They bound them both, threw them over horses, and rode back to Silver Creek. By noon, the whole town had gathered. The rope was already prepared.
"Wait!" The voice cut through the crowd like a knife. Everyone turned. Martha Garrett pushed through the mob, John's widow. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. She carried something wrapped in cloth. "Stop this," she said. "Please, just stop." Tom stepped forward. "Martha, go home. This ain't for you to see." "My husband," her voice broke, "my husband was not a good man." The crowd went silent. "I found these hidden in our barn." She unwrapped the cloth, revealing a blood-stained dress and a letter in John's handwriting. He killed that boy's mother, shot her in cold blood and buried her because she rejected him. He wrote about it, wrote it like he was proud. Sheriff Dalton took the items, his face going gray as he read. "The boy came to our house," Martha continued, tears streaming down her face. "He begged John to confess, to just admit what he'd done. And John, he pulled his gun first. I saw it through the window. I was too afraid to say anything, too afraid of what people would think, of being alone." She looked at Daniel, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Tom Garrett's hand fell from the rope. He stared at his brother's widow, then at the boy, then at the ground. The crowd began to disperse, silent as ghosts. They cut Daniel loose. Jacob caught him as the boy's legs gave out, held him while he shook with sobs that had been locked inside for too long. The territorial marshal arrived 2 days later, reviewed the evidence, ruled it self-defense. Daniel Crow was a free boy, though freedom felt heavy in a town that had almost killed him. Jacob stood with him on the steps of the general store, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "What will you do now?" Jacob asked. "I don't know. I got no people left. You could stay with me, help with the trap lines, learn the land." Jacob glanced at the boy. "If you want." Daniel looked up at him, this stranger who jumped into a river, stood against a mob, nearly died for someone he barely knew. "Why'd you do it? Why'd you save me?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone once told me that the things we do when nobody's watching, those are the things that tell us who we really are. I needed to know I was still someone worth being." They rode out of Silver Creek together as the stars began to appear. Behind them, the town settled back into its rhythms, forever changed by the weight of truth and the cost of justice almost denied. The frontier had tested them both, and somehow they'd survived. Thank you for listening to this tale here on Frontier Love Tools. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe because out here, where the rivers run cold and the truth runs deeper, every sunset hides another story waiting to be told. End.